ever a guidebook for Final Fantasy 1? Or was it just, it kind of came with half a guidebook? I mean, it kind of came, like you said, it came with maps.
Like, the game came with a booklet, right? Like every game does, instruction manual. And that instruction manual had, what's it called? It had everything up to Mount Golg, or back then it was called the Gurgu Volcano. It didn't have maps in the instruction manual. It had almost like a guide, though. Like, it would, like a DM's list of things that are happening all the way up to there, would tell you what to do, how to get through the game. They'd start you out with the game, and then you were on your own from there. Then after that, well, it also had 2 placemats that came with it, front and back. One placemat had all the equipment and armor and stuff on one side, and all the monsters were on the other side. Yeah. With all that information. And the other placemat was the world map on one side, and like the first several dungeons. It had like the Fiend's Temple, where Garland was, Marsh Cave. It went like up to the Earth Cave. That was like the last map on the back there, because they weren't big maps if you were to actually place them next to each other. And after that, you're on your own, basically.
Yeah. Well, if you'll excuse me for 1 second, I need to adjust my AC because it's hot in here.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm back. I'm back and we're live.
Yeah. It's Oh, I don't think old games are hard. In general, there's some hard old games. I don't think in general old games are hard. I think new games are just too easy. I think we talked about this before. I think most of it comes to do with the fact that the better engines get for handling games, the smoother they get. By default, games start to become easier. Because a lot of like the difficulty in really old games were just how janky the mechanics were, and you having to adjust to that as a player.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I don't remember at the time anyone saying games were particularly hard. I mean, obviously there's nothing to compare against, but it's all in retrospect. All the
there might be people saying this particular game is hard, but you're just comparing it to everything else that you've played that's currently on the market.
Yeah, like I don't remember anyone, like nobody thought the original Legend of Zelda was a hard game.
That's an easy game.
Oh yeah. But today, it's like, oh my gosh, Zelda 1 is so hard, and Zelda 2, forget it, I'll never beat that.
Well, that's like, because they don't have tutorials. People are so spoiled now that any game without a tutorial that tells you what to do is a hard game. I prefer games without tutorials.
I mean, I'll tell you, going back, I played Zelda 2 recently in the next couple of years. It actually is harder than I remember at the end. Like near the end,
especially the final boss is pretty hard. It doesn't have to be. There's ways you can cheese it if you have the right equipment. If you just run up to him with base equipment, though, you can easily get fucked.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, as long as you're all leveled up and everything, and you know what to do, basically, I just go off into the corner and duck and sit there until it
Well, again, there's ways you can cheese them. That you found out what to do. Rewind that, say you're going to this boss blind the first time that you've ever fought him. You don't know how to go into the corner and cheese him and stuff like that. And you start fighting him.
Yeah. I guess. I never fought him like that. I don't remember how, but I knew how to beat him from the very beginning. Someone probably told me.
Probably, because the game doesn't tell you.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure the first... And maybe the first time, I don't remember. Maybe the first time I played him, he killed me. But I remember the first time I ever beat him, I had an NES Max, which had a turbo button. So you just go into the corner, duck around, and hit turbo sword thrust, turbo B or whatever. Yeah, it was an official Nintendo controller.
Yeah. Do you?
But
So how I usually do is, do you use the ferry to get there quickly?
no.
I use the ferry spell to get into the spot like as soon as possible, because you can safely go anywhere as a ferry, basically.
Like on that screen?
Yeah.
Can you attack as a fairy?
No, but you can quickly get out of there.
But you can't change back from a fairy. What are you talking about?
Whatever.
I'm confused. Are you thinking of a different boss?
No, I'm thinking of Dark Link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually, I don't even have enough magic to use fairy because he had to use thunder to beat the thunder.
You did, yeah. Fuck that guy. Fuck that whole temple.
Just run over to the low. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just saying, frankly, the last part, like the part where you're roaming through what looks like lava, but it doesn't hurt you. Like that whole area is very hard. Like I played it recently, I'm like, I don't even remember this being so hard, constantly getting hit and knocked into the lava. And then the final temple, was very hard.
Yeah.
Even though I actually had memorized how to get through it, I don't know if it's a word device, but it's left, right, left, right, right. That's how you get through it.
What's funny is because a lot of people have not ever played that game or even beaten it. I had to point this out to my brothers. People don't realize how many references are made to that game in like later Zelda games. Like how Saria was the name of a town, and then you see that name pop up later as the sage in Ocarina of Time. And there's a lot of that happens.
All the sages,
are named after the towns.
All the sages, Darunia is in there, one of the towns.
And there's just a lot of references specifically to that game, but because it's at this point probably the least played Zelda game, it's either that or the Oracles. The Oracles aren't played that often either, but a lot of people don't pick up on those references.
Oh yeah, I thought that was really cool. Hey, Rebellious. I thought that was really cool when Ocarina of Time came out, and it was like, oh yeah, all these I recognize it immediately. All the sages are named.
No, I did too because
Zelda 2.
I already had Zelda 2 because of my parents, and that's a game I grew up playing.
Yeah.
I didn't beat it until I was probably after I beat Ocarina of Time, but I got through most of the game. So as a kid, that game is hard though, because there's a lot of convoluted stuff in the game. That's what makes 2 hard, right?
Yeah.
It's not mechanically that hard. It doesn't take that much mechanical skill to beat that game. But from like the perspective of being a kid, there's a lot of like really convoluted things that if you don't have access to like guides or bonus information, just having to figure it out, because the game doesn't exactly tell you how to do everything that you need to do.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the case where I think I had a Nintendo Power that basically had maps of everything. Back before there were guides for everything. I'm pretty sure Nintendo Power had everything.
Like, my mom had notes for everything, but I could not read her handwriting.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of other games from the 80s. Like, because there's this whole myth about NES games just being hard.
A lot of them are easy as fuck.
Yeah. Well, Kid Icarus was one where I found it hard at first when I was playing it as like a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
But eventually, and even today, because I've played that like continuously throughout my life. Like I've never stopped playing Kid Icarus.
Yeah.
Now I find it incredibly easy.
I always found the underworld hard when I was younger.
Yeah.
But once you got to Skyworld, like the game became stupidly easy.
Yeah. The vertical levels are difficult. But
once you start going horizontal, go fuck yourself, the game.
Yeah. Even the sky, well, I mean, I guess the sky, vertical level is a little harder than the horizontal, but by that point, you've got upgraded arrows, you probably have like spinny shield thing, and you know, so you're probably okay. But yeah, as a kid, I did find that part hard. But like once I mastered it,
when people think of NES games, right? I think this is the real thing. Battletoads gives NES difficulty a really bad name because that's like an exceptionally hard game.
Yeah, and I think TMNT, that NES game, I don't know if I've ever played it, but I've heard it's hard. But like, you know, people say Mega Man's hard. I'm like, not really. It just requires a lot of repetition.
Parts of Mega Man that are genuinely skill difficult if you don't do them in the recommended order, right? Because you can get equipment that makes parts of Mega Man really easy. But there are certain levels that you could technically do them in any order you want, up until, obviously, Wily's Castle, because you have to beat all the Robot Masters to do that. But, like, in 2, try doing Flashman stage first, and tell me how well that goes for you.
Yeah, you do have to do them in order. I'll tell you, the original Castlevania, I don't know if I've ever beaten the original Castlevania. That game is hard. In my opinion, incredibly hard.
Yeah, I always preferred Simon's Quest. I thought that was a more balanced and well-crafted game.
I did too. And I never had any of the trouble that people seem to have. Again, I'm guessing there was probably a Nintendo Power that told you a lot of stuff. But like people say, oh, this thing like with the tornado is all obscure, and I'm like, I figured that out easily. Like, how did I figure that out? I'm guessing
I don't even know if you need Nintendo Power. I think maybe some people are stupid. I think that was just kind of intuitive. I never had a problem with the tornado.
Maybe. I never had trouble with it either, and I'm genuinely confused as to why I never had any problem with that, and that other people did.
Anyway, welcome to the Vomitorium. As always, I'm your host, The Metal, and joining me is my co-host, Marsupial Gamer. No, I have not introduced us until this point. How you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I am doing all right. Speaking of Nintendo
I thought we
Switch,
did the intro.
No, we did not do the intro.
Okay.
We were just so busy talking about NES games that we haven't gotten to the intro yet. But Joshua Hughes in the chat brings up Nintendo Switch because he wasn't sure what game we're talking about. Although, most of the games we were talking about, you can play on the Nintendo Switch if you have the online. Because it comes with the NES options. Icarus is on there
and for sure. And a
lot of them. Zelda 2's on there. I don't know if Konami
let them
put Castlevania. Is Castlevania on there?
No, you have to buy. There's a Castlevania collection you can buy.
Oh, okay. Well, that's like the same with Mega Man then, because I know Capcom, you can only get Mega Man through the collection. There's not a lot, like almost any third-party games in the Switch Online, which is what a lot of people are complaining about, but those companies need to make money too, and that's why they're selling collections on the system.
Yeah, I do have I have both the Castlevania and Mega Man collection.
Yeah.
On the Switch.
But the Switch is about to get a portable competitor.
Really?
Yeah. Well, possibly. Competitor. I mean, I couldn't see Microsoft or Sony making a portable competitor to the Switch.
Yeah.
Because the Switch is already established. It would probably only be just as powerful, so nobody would want to jump to the other two for something that's not more powerful. And it would have most of the same games because the Switch is actually doing fine on third-party titles right now. So it really wouldn't help. Valve, on the other hand, who they said they are indeed still making a Switch-like mobile console for their Valve like Steam games. Valve could possibly make something that could be a competitor to the Switch on that market, just because of how big the pool of Steam games are. Especially if it allows.
So is it running Windows?
I don't know. It's probably going to be running what's the Steam OS, which back when Steam was making their OS, I do believe it was Linux-based, which is one of the reasons why they started that big push for getting games ready for Linux in the first place. But it was also going to run with the ability to run Windows games, like that. They were making the system like that. It's not that hard. I mean, people use like Wine and stuff to run Windows applications on Linux systems all the time.
Yeah. The only question that we need to ask is, will it run Skyrim?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, come on. Anything can run Skyrim. You can run Skyrim on a toaster at this point in time.
That's right.
But yeah, making a Switch console type thing. And when they say Switch-like portable, I'm assuming, because anybody can make a portable console, right? Like, basically, if you weren't specifically trying to make it like the Switch, you could just say you were making your own, like, NVIDIA Shield or something like that. If they're saying a Switch-like console, that means they want something that can dock and be played like an actual console.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that. So it's not just mobile. You can actually play it on a TV or whatever.
Yeah, because that's the only way that you would define it as being like the Switch. Because that's really what puts the Switch out compared to other mobile things.
Yeah, otherwise they just call it a mobile console.
Yeah. Right now, it looks like it's being called the Steam Pal. That name's probably tentative, but it looks like it's coming out this year. The launch is 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I'm still waiting on my Switch Pro.
Yeah, it's expected to pack either an Intel or AMD processor similar to the power of other Switch-like PCs, or like, the Shield and stuff like that. And like a lot of them have used Steam already. Like I think the NVIDIA Shield mostly functions using Steam as a base for the store.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I think if anyone can put out something that can sort of compete.
Yeah, and it would just be competition on like the monetary level when I say that, because nothing's going to take consumers away from Nintendo. In fact, a lot of people I know that are PC gamers, when they say that, they say PC Master Race, but that's just yelling at Xbox and PlayStation. Most of them I know always get the Nintendo console anyway. But that's because Nintendo is the only company that puts out enough exclusive first-party games to warrant you getting their console.
Yeah. Well, there's recent news also that 20% of recent Switch purchases have been to households that already have a Switch.
Yeah, throughout the last year is what they were going by. Like a fifth of all 2020 purchases came from people who already own Switches.
Yeah, which tells me they're gonna blow right past the Wii in sales.
I think technically I counted in that too for the one I got, because where I live we already had a Switch. I just needed a personal one, so during 2020 I ended up getting one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be kind of cool. A lot of times I'll buy games on Steam and the Switch because I want to play it at home. Because frankly, the Steam version is often better. Yeah. But I want to play it if I'm away from home or whatever. So, Stardew, Skyrim, Don't Starve.
I have a gaming PC, so I have like a gaming laptop, so I have no reason to get something like that. I could just take my laptop with me on the go. But most people don't have gaming laptops, right? I've got mine because gaming laptops tend to be pretty powerful. I looked at the specs of it. It was everything I needed. So that it's my main work computer. Most people, if they have a PC for gaming, it is a built PC, like a tower or a normal desktop computer. And if they have a laptop, it's probably so they could do work on the go or watch a movie or something like that. So I think this is actually a perfect product for most people. I'm obviously not the intended target demographic for it, but I think for like your average casual audience, especially people that always hear about PC gaming, but they're just not interested in dedicating money towards building a gaming PC. I know a lot of people like that. Like, I just want something that I can plug in and it works. I think this is a good product for attracting more people to that marketplace in general.
Is it gonna be like $3.99 or $2.99 or something? Like
I don't know. We don't have a price for it yet. It should be coming soon, right? This came out of a report, right? So this is actual information. It's more than just a rumor. But there's no price. And if it's launching this year, probably for the holiday season, that's when I would assume it would launch. We should be getting a price pretty soon because we're getting into the summer now.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, if they price it right, it could do well. I mean, as long as it's not like $700 or something ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, it said it's going to be about as powerful as the Switch or other things like it. That might be by design so they can keep the price down because Valve is pretty smart. A lot. I honestly think they're smarter than Microsoft or Sony in this regard. I think they're going to try to keep the price down as low as possible because that is what attracts consumers.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's as powerful as the current Switch that came out in 2017, it should be like $199.
Yeah. Well, it's this other Switch-like PCs, right? So it doesn't actually use the Switch as the name there. If it does use it, it probably has like the updated version of the processor. It's probably going to be as powerful as you'd expect a Switch Pro to be.
Okay. If that's the case, then yeah, I could see it being like $399, which would be reasonable. If you're
that's a fair price, to be honest.
Yeah, but that's how much the Switch is, right? Isn't it $399?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around there.
I think the Switch Lite is $299.
Yeah, because wasn't like the Wii U like $250?
I think so.
Nintendo consoles are usually reasonably priced for whatever they do.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm mistaken. A Switch is $299.
Yeah, the Lite's like $199, I think.
Okay, I was off by $100. I did start to think that sounded a little expensive. Yeah, so Switch is $300. Switch Lite is $200. But I did hear that I guess it was on a recent investor call. Somebody was asking or was mentioning the fact, which has only been a rumor up till now, I guess, that Nintendo is making a Switch Pro with these OLED screens. Which, I mean, it was a rumor, but like pretty much everyone knew it was true. But there was like a recent investor call where somebody was talking about it as if they knew for certain that it was fact. So it does sound more and more like we're going to get a Switch Pro this year.
Yeah, see, I only want the Switch Pro to be made if it is extending the lifespan of the Switch, right? And I mean the normal Switch too. I don't want to end up in a new 3DS situation. I had a new 3DS where you end up with certain games that are so taxing on the original system that you can only really play it on the upgraded version of the system.
Yeah.
Because then you might as well just say, this is the Switch 2. Like, right?
Yeah. It just happens to be backwards compatible to the Switch 1.
Mm-hmm.
They could do that, I suppose.
Yeah. We're almost getting to the point where the Switch is coming to the end of the normal console lifespan. I mean, it was 2017 when it came out. Usually consoles somewhere between 5 to 6 years.
And we don't know what Nintendo's thinking in terms of, are they thinking about this console with a lifespan comparable to other like home consoles or like, you know, their handhelds? Because I mean, with the DS, you had so many iterations. The DS, DSi.
Well, that's the weird thing about the handhelds, right?
Yeah, like,
because the handhelds have higher variance in generational length, right? Because the Game Boy, going to the Game Boy Color, I think had one of the largest lifespans or longest lengths of time.
Yeah.
Since they were still making games that were compatible with the Game Boy that were color only, but there were color only games. Game Boy Advance actually had one of the shorter lifespans because you went from Game Boy Advance into SP really quickly through until the DS came out. But then the DS lasted for a long time because aside from the digital-only games of the DSi, there was no physical game that was just the DSi. You could still play them on the DS. But then the 3DS comes out. And
but
it's
like, I almost think of all of those. Yeah. Because like they were backwards compatible all the way up to the end. Like a new 3DS could play an original DS game.
Yes.
Right.
But I would still separate them as different consoles, and everybody else does too. A DS and a 3DS are very different things, from hardware down to like functionality in game and stuff like that. But Nintendo's kind of always made backwards compatible handhelds. Which is because the Switch is also the console, what makes it so different from everything they've done before. Because the 3DS could play DS games, the DS could play Game Boy Advance games, Game Boy Advance could play Game Boy games and stuff like that. So,
but it's hard to say. I mean, they could come out and call it a Switch 2 and just say, Switch 2 games only work on a Switch 2. But it does also play all the games from the Switch library.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't mind that, though, as long as they're just, like, really clear and upfront about things. Because this was the problem with the Wii U. Because the Wii U was fully backwards compatible to Wii games. But a lot of people, due to the bad naming convention, thought it was just an attachment for the Wii. Like that second screen. Yeah. They didn't think it was a new console or anything. And that's what I would want you to be very clear if they were coming out with a successor to the Switch that was still the Switch, to name it something that was the successor to the Switch. It's like, it's fully backwards compatible with the last generation, including the eShop. You don't have to like rebuy or purchase games or anything. I would be perfectly fine with that. I just need to know. I'm going to know, but most consumers won't, because a lot of people were confused when it came to the Wii U.
Yeah, but I think that was just the Wii U name, like specifically that. Like if they had called it a Wii 2, I think that would have been a lot less confusing.
Well, that's why I'm saying if the Switch Pro is a Switch 2, they're better off calling it a Switch 2 than a Switch Pro, right? Because a Switch Pro is going to make everybody think like, oh, well, I don't need to get that. Anything that's available on that, I'm going to be able to play on my Switch.
Yeah. Yeah, which makes you think maybe they should call it a Switch 2 if they really want people to buy it.
They with the new 3DS, right? Like, they should have called it the 3DS 2, because there were certain games that technically you could load them into a normal 3DS, but they would throttle hard.
Yeah.
And the new 3DS had more buttons on it too, which let you play games in different ways. They were better off just calling it something else.
And like, so wait a second. Did another stream just end? Because for some reason we've got people coming in saying hi again. And I'm like,
I don't know.
We did start. They said
they were late to Rick's stream. I don't know if Rick's stream was still going on.
Okay. Now that was confusing because like Rebellious comes in and says, hey, like 30 minutes ago. And then she just came in a minute ago and said it again. And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. Did we just go live? I think we've been live.
I haven't gotten the red mark saying that we've gone off.
Yeah, that was confusing. But thank you. Welcome, Timothy and Joshua and Rebellious. Anyway, there were games that were exclusive to the new 3DS, though, right? Like you literally could not play them on.
No, that was one of the big problems. Is there were games that wouldn't really work on the 3DS, but you could still load them in, and they would just throttle because they didn't separate the operating system at all. It didn't know it wasn't supposed to be loading this game.
Really?
Yeah.
Because there were games that I specifically did not buy because I didn't have a new 3DS and I assumed you can't play it on the old one.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't, because you wouldn't have been able to play them, but your system wouldn't have told you any different.
Okay. I can't remember what I'm thinking of, but I never did get a new 3DS. Peach did.
Yeah.
Like, but I never did.
One of the games, Hyrule Warriors, was technically playable on a normal 3DS, but there were certain side missions, like the side levels that you didn't need to do to break the game, that would end up, it wouldn't be unplayable, but it would throttle.
I had Hyrule Warriors.
Did you do 100% of it? Because I've seen people stream it too, and it's throttled really hard.
I mean, it wasn't great. It was probably, it was my least favorite version. But that came out before the new 3DS.
It actually came out at the same time in Japan. It just hadn't hit here yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because we got the new 3DS later than Japan did. But Hyrule Warriors came out the same time worldwide.
Interesting. No, I had it on the old one. I played the hell out of it. In fact, I came close to, I don't think I 100%ed it, but
I was mad when it launched too. Because I wanted the normal one, which I did eventually get. But when we did get it, like a few months or so later, at first we only got the new 3DS XL because they thought that's all Americans wanted. And the only way to get the normal one, when they did finally pull it out, was through bundles. You couldn't get it by itself. You had to get a bundle. And the first one that was available, which was a game I was already interested in anyway, was the Happy Home Academy or whatever it was for Animal Crossing. So I have an Animal Crossing themed new 3DS, but it's got plates, so if I had bought any other plates, I could change them out. But I wanted the normal size one because that's what fits in my pockets very well. And
I have the Animal Crossing themed Switch.
Yeah, and I was just like, what? Only the XL is going to be available? What the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah, I like the XL. That was my favorite one.
Yeah.
I like that better.
There wasn't a 3DS too. They probably should have called it that, though, because there were physical limitations on the original 3DS, and there were games that you really couldn't enjoy. Now, Hyrule Warriors, I was saying, it's playable. It's not one of the ones where you can't play it, but there are certain games that, like, the requirements on it were so much heavier that even just booting the game up, once you get past a menu, it just becomes unplayable.
Yeah. Well, both the Wii U and the Switch versions of Hyrule Warriors were better.
Yeah. Well, it's actually fine if you play it on a new 3DS.
Well, yeah, but I wonder if, does it scale the number of creatures that appear on the screen? Is my question, based on the system. Because the problem that I had with the 3DS version was not enough enemies would appear on the screen because it had to throttle it. Yeah. And the Switch that made the Switch version, because here's the thing, a lot of the missions you had to kill a certain number of enemies in a certain amount of time. And those missions, some of them were absolutely, like, almost impossible to pass on the 3DS. Because it's like, there's not enough enemies. They won't spawn. And I played those missions on
the reason they won't spawn, there is an internal, like, clock based on the RAM that the system has available. More do spawn up if you put it into a new 3DS.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's 100% playable on the new 3DS.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did notice that.
Yeah.
Because I was playing it on the old one, and it was frustrating because it was just like, it played just fine as far as I could tell, but there was like hardly any enemies, and I'm like, this map's impossible. Like, I can't beat it.
A lot of reviews of the game at the time would say, don't even buy it if you're not playing it on the new 3DS.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even realize. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I was definitely frustrated by that. And then when I would play those same, and I remember which ones were absolutely impossible. Played them on the Switch, easy. Super easy. I was just like, and they didn't change the actual difficulty of it. It was just like, you have to defeat 1,000 enemies.
It functions now. That's the difference.
Yeah, and it's like on the Switch, it's like, I mean, they could display 1,000 enemies on the screen at once, no problem.
Yeah.
So, I did find the 3DS version. Obviously, now I know why. Was extremely frustrating.
Yeah, because you were playing it on the wrong version of the 3DS.
I didn't even realize that. And I didn't even realize that the new 3DS would make it run better.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
It was just a better version of the 3DS in all ways. It's basically, it was what you are wanting from the Switch Pro, but I don't want them to call it the Switch Pro is the problem, unless it is literally just more powerful and the games will still run fine on the Switch. But knowing Nintendo and knowing developers too, right? I'm less worried about Nintendo. I'm more worried about third-party developers, and this was the problem with Hyrule Warriors because it was developed by another party, right? It was the freaking Koei Tecmo, whoever does the Mosu games. I don't know what the smaller subsidiary within Tecmo that does the Mosu games. They might even call it Project Mosu for all I know. But they did it.
Level 30 or something.
Yeah. At any time third parties have access to more, they stop planning with less in mind. And that was the problem with a lot of the new 3DS stuff at the end of the life cycle. Because unlike the Wii U, their handheld never had any shortage of third-party games. Other people were making stuff for the DS and the 3DS the entire life cycle.
And if you look at like Samus Returns, one of the very latest games on the system, that ran just fine on the original 3DS because that was a Nintendo product.
Yeah. So I'm less worried about Nintendo if they make a Switch Pro. I'm more worried about the third parties making games. And it's like, sometimes third parties do make Nintendo exclusive games. That happens. If it's not Nintendo exclusive, I don't care. I'll just go play it on my computer instead. But if it's a Nintendo exclusive third-party game, it's like you're going to force me to buy the Switch Pro because I know this thing ain't going to work on the normal Switch.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if they use the latest Tegra chip, which is 2 generations removed from the one that's in the original Switch, they've got to name it a Switch 2 because that thing is a monster. It's unbelievably faster than the one that's in a Switch now. Like, they could do amazing things with a new Switch if they use that chip.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not going to be backwards. I mean, like new games.
It won't be forward compatible. It would be the better way of looking at it.
The current Switch will not be totally forward compatible if they use that chip because there's no way they'd be able to run the same games.
Well, it might for like Nintendo games, right? Because Nintendo is good at working with lower specs. What they would just be doing is like, here is the game, but we have options in here for you to crank the quality of it up, right? That's how Nintendo would do it. Third party, though, that's the problem. Nobody else is going to do that.
But even Breath of the Wild has lag issues on the current Switch.
Yeah.
So
especially in like what's it, the grove with the Decker tree. The Korok Forest,
The Korok Forest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you get to an area where there's a lot of grass being rendered.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's weird as it's the grass too, right? Like, it's not the enemies on the screen or anything like that for the most part. It's the actual flora that ends up throttling the system.
Yeah, well, you got hundreds of blades of grass, so got to render all those. But yeah, I've noticed. You know, what's funny was when I first played through, I didn't even notice. But then I watched people's reviews and talking about that, and then I went back to the Korok Forest. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I didn't even notice. But there's
when I first played through, I played it on the Wii U, I think, right? No, my second playthrough is the Wii U. I played it on the Switch first. That's why I noticed it, because it's like, why is everything running so much smoother on my second playthrough? And it's like,
it runs smoother on the Wii U?
Yes, it actually runs smoother on the Wii U than it does on the Switch. It's slightly downscaled. It looks virtually the same. But you could tell that they programmed the game for the Wii U first. And then they went back in and they touched up and upscaled things for the Switch. And that's probably why it gets throttled in areas, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the difference, I think the reason it gets throttled on the Switch is because grass is no longer treated as a clump of grass is not a single object. In the Wii U version, grass has like a defined area, so when you like swing your sword, that much grass will get chopped or whatever, right? On the Switch version, I believe they removed the parameter for that, so every blade of grass is its own object. So you can get like these circular fires of grass and stuff like that, and it doesn't get like these weird clump patterns.
Right. Well, I guess we'll see. I'm sure. Well, it's hard to say. It's like sometimes, just depending on where we are in Nintendo's
that's actually what's worrying me. Is we're probably gonna have to get a new one regardless, because one of the reasons I think certain games keep getting delayed is because we're getting closer to a more powerful system coming out, and they don't want to launch Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Prime 4 and stuff, when a new version of the system is coming out. They want to wait till afterwards or with it. And you're like, oh, great, that means this game is going to be made for this better system, which means I'm going to have to go and get it to be able to play it.
Yeah, because they're developing with whatever the new system is. That's what they're developing against. I bet there's third parties out there that are doing it like that, obviously are under heavy NDA. They get sued into oblivion if they say anything. But I'm sure there's third parties, Bethesda, and who knows who else.
Yeah, you almost never get leaks from anyone. I think one of the Switch Pro rumors was leaked, but it's hard to actually take it for like any amount of weight, and it was from frickin' Ubisoft.
Yeah. I assume large developers at least get early versions.
Yeah.
No idea.
What's funny too is like they could just give them a version of it now. You don't actually need like a dev kit because everything's just made on a computer, and you just like need to be able to put like an SD card in there to test to see if the game runs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They just give you the specs. Yeah. But I bet the specs are even under heavy NDA.
Yeah. I'm sure. As opposed to, like, Valve is probably a lot looser about it. Like, I'm sure there's still an NDA there. And this is why we're only hearing about it now, even though it's planned to come out this year. There was a rumor about it, like, a year and a half ago. This is when we first heard that they might be making something along these lines. And this report is basically confirming that rumor is either true or still likely to happen. And it's actually, I think it came from Newell, which is funny. Like, when we were watching Rick's stream, I used the name Gaben, and you're like, Gaben? I was like, get Gabe Newell, CEO, co-founder of Valve. Everybody just calls him Gaben because his name is Gabe N.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, no, everybody calls him Gaben.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's actually been stuck in New Zealand for a while.
Oh, really?
Living for like a year, yeah. Because of COVID.
Well, is that because they just are not having any airline flights out of there, or?
Yeah, not in or out, so he's just kind of stuck. They've been treating him very hospitably, though. I mean, New Zealand's a very nice place to people. Yeah, he was hanging out with, what was that one? Rocket Labs. He was hanging out with them. He was going to send that model of Gnome Chomsky, the gnome that shows up in the Half-Life games, the little garden gnome. He's going to send like a replica of him up into space with one of their rockets.
Interesting.
But yeah,
that's cool.
And he's what I'm reading. He's part of in the Q&A. This is where the report came from, where he was talking about how they're still planning And they got the idea people would get a better idea by the end of the year. So I think if it's still launching this year, it's probably going to be the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm excited, even if I'm not getting it, because it means there'll probably be more people I can play Steam games with. That's the more important thing. I want more people to play games with.
By the way, you know why I'm pushing, and one of the reasons I'm pushing Rick to play Portal 2 is I want to play multiplayer.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Once he beats it, I mean, you don't have to beat it to play multiplayer.
No, we need to get Rick a copy of Stardew Valley. That's what we need to do. I got a copy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we could all play Stardew together.
You know, I started playing with Shabby, and then he just stopped, and I guess,
yeah.
It's typical when he's on, whatever, Czech Republic time.
Yeah. Well, we just need to do it like a day, right? Just like pick a day. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have to be like the same day every week. We just have to be like, okay, let's play Stardew together this week.
Yeah. Totally. I want to play, and even like Nerd Wonder said she's looking for people to play multiplayer Stardew with, and I volunteered, and then I never heard back from her.
Yeah. I think Rick would enjoy Stardew.
Yeah. Pretty low-key. I mean,
I feel like he would probably just spend all of his time in the mine. Just killing like slimes.
You can do that while the rest of us are farming or whatever. Yeah. That's one thing.
I have to go in the mine. I need to get that amethyst so I can woo over little, Abigail.
Yeah. Need amethyst. And that's all. I believe Emily likes that as well.
Yeah.
Well, Emily's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I will be playing Portal 2 live Wednesday or Friday. I knew I'd get him to respond in the chat if I mentioned it.
Speaking of Portal, one of the other things we're probably going to talk about, it seems this is not a good thing, to be honest. The Portal movie that is being directed by J.J. Abrams is still alive. Pun intended. But the Half-Life movie is not.
I didn't know there was going to be a Portal movie.
Yeah, this has been talked about for a few years now. I think it was announced back in 2013. Which is a long time for something to be sitting in, like, production hell.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, they announced the Fallout movie at around the same time. I think it was going to be, obviously, in a shared cinematic universe, because Half-Life. The Half-Life and Portal are in the same universe, so... Mm-hmm. But the Half-Life movie is no longer going to be happening.
I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the Portal movie is good, right, then maybe we can just get another director to do the Half-Life one. Honestly, I'm not a fan of J.J. Abrams.
Yeah. Haven't done anything good since Alias.
How long ago was Alias?
I don't know. Back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
That was my introduction to J.J. Abrams, and it was great. Alias was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then it's been downhill ever since.
Yeah, Alias was prior to Lost, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Then I will agree, because Lost was shit.
Because I was watching, I missed the first season of Lost because it was on at the same time as Alias. And I was watching Alias. So.
Yeah, because Alias was like 2001, I think, is when that started.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I'll agree with that then, because Alias wasn't bad. I remember seeing some episodes of that. But Lost, I watched a lot of that because my parents were, and that was just awful.
Well, the beginning was good, the first few seasons.
Lost would all have been better if it ended in season 3.
Yeah. Frankly, Alias too. That went downhill at the end. I thought you were gonna, when you said Portal, I thought you were gonna talk about this prototype of Ocarina of Time in the 90s that apparently had the same mechanics as Portal.
I've heard of that. Yeah. I wasn't gonna talk about it, but I've heard about it.
I think that's interesting. Yeah. Link was going to be able to create portals to beam around. I don't think it was going to be quite the same. I don't think they were going to have like physics puzzles, but they were basically going to use that as a way of fast travel.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be an unheard of mechanic for Zelda. He did have the frickin' magic mirror and moonstone combination, so you can turn into a bunny back in Link to the Past, and he technically was portaling around. Now, for the most part, though, that was like a one-way. You had to go and find an actual set portal to get to the other side, but it was it's kind of a precedent that already exists within Zelda. I could see it being expanded in that direction.
Yeah, Zelda's always had some sort of, well, not always, but recent has been, ever since Ocarina, trying to think. It's had fast travel in many games. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Well, because Link to the Past had fast travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got the bird on the wind vane, and it would take you places. And Link's Awakening had fast travel. The witch.
Did we talk? We talked briefly about the Loftwing Amiibo for.
Yeah, I'm kind of upset about that. Luckily, I was not planning on getting that game anyway, for many reasons. But
see, I don't think it's that big of a deal because so normally in order to travel back and forth from the sky, you have to find these owl statues.
Yeah.
And the freaking owl statues are everywhere. Like, it was never an issue for me to be like, oh, I wish I could, teleport to the sky right here.
It's not that it's an issue. It's an act of implementation, right? So this is one of the big key differences within this remastering of the game and the original game. But this key, almost selling point difference exists mostly just to sell something else.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Yeah.
I wish that they hadn't even implemented it at all because
I would prefer that.
Yeah. But you're right. They're only doing it to sell amiibos.
Yeah.
But you really don't need that to play.
Yeah, because the real selling point difference in this game, you could take out the fast travel, is the fact that everything can be mapped to button controls now. That's the big version difference that should sell it.
Yeah, definitely. And then it's HD.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a huge stickler of HD and stuff like that. That doesn't bother me. I mean, it's cool, but I think the controls thing is like the way cooler part of it. Like, that's much cooler.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that works.
Yeah.
Because frankly, I never had a problem with it being motion controlled. I love Skyward Sword as it was. But in this one, apparently you can still do that with the remote, whatever you call it, the Joy-Cons.
Yeah.
But I'll be interested to see how well that works versus using the analog stick to do the motion controls.
Yeah. So, speaking of control adaptation, I was told on somebody whose opinion of games I trust, which is not a lot of people. It's a very, very small group of people who I trust their opinions on games and their reviews. Remember how we were talking about there was a remaster of The World Ends With You on the Switch? Because I'm like, why did they not remake this game? And then it turns out they already did. Don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Or anybody who might be interested. Because the original World Ends With You was a DS game that had had stylus controls on the bottom where you had to do certain things, very specific things with the touchscreen. The Switch version, I don't think it even uses the touchscreen when undocked, which is weird that they don't even give you that option too. But it changed all the stylus-based things, or the touchscreen stuff, to motion controls to be able to compensate for it, and it's balls.
Motion? How? What?
Yeah, you use like the Joy-Con and point it at the screen, and you have to do the same motions on the screen that you would have done with the stylus on the touch screen.
How does that work in handheld mode? You can't?
I don't know.
That's weird.
Yeah. Not recommended from what I've heard. And again, this is one of the people I actually trust their reviews and recommendations for games, so better off emulating it and using a mouse on the touchscreen. Or I think the phone version's fine, because the phone version's almost identical, but the phone version is literally just a whole touchscreen, so you could play that version of the game.
Yeah, it is available for Android and iOS.
Yeah.
So the Switch version, when did they come out with the Switch version? Remix.
I think it's basically just the Android and iOS version, but they took the touchscreen controls off and just used motion control instead.
Yeah, so it's The World Ends With You Final Remix, $50.
Yeah.
Oh, it was released in 2018. Wow, it's been around. It's been here for a while.
So it's not a recommended purchase. We were talking about controls, and it reminded me, because we did talk about this before. It's like, probably don't get it. Just get it for your phone. If you want it that bad and you want to play a remastered version, just get it for your phone, or emulate it.
Or if you have a DS, get it on your DS.
Yeah. Go back and it's not that hard to find used copies of it. It was a game that was actually widely purchased. Just a lot of people never. It wasn't on their radar, but enough people bought it that you can find used copies of The World Ends With You.
Cool. One of these days, I'm gonna start to rebuild my library of physical games.
Yeah, what you need to do, because I know a cool place that you can check out because it's huge. If you ever make your way passing through Texas again, I know last time you were on a very tight trip. You were here for a day while you're waiting for your bus or whatever to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on a tight schedule. You didn't actually stop through here. Yeah. You were just waiting for your bus.
But the last time I was actually driving through,
you were driving
the other direction.
Yeah. But if you have time, we've got this really cool place around here called Game Over Video. And Game Over is just a used game store, but it is I believe it's only in Texas. It is a chain, so they actually circulate products between the stores, like things that sit for too long and stuff. And they have the entire thing is in chronological by system, but then alphabetical to make it easy to find when you're in the right section. And it goes from Atari all the way to modern games. And even my favorite one in the area has a small little history museum in the back, and it even has some arcade cabinets. It's a really cool place, and you can find almost anything there.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I highly recommend anybody in there's one in Arlington. I know there's one in Fort Worth. It was actually not too far from where I was living at the time. There's a few of them in general. The main one, though, is down in Austin, which I have yet to go to that one. I do want to visit it. It's a lot bigger than even the one we have here. Though a lot of people say the best location is the Arlington one.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few.
What's it called?
It's a cool place. Game Over is the name of it. It's a Game Over video game museum.
And they have the original boxes and manuals and everything.
Now that it's hard to come by, and they have a bunch of. So they have just the cartridges and stuff on the shelves for the less valuable games, or if a disc game came in a box, they'll have a box there. They'll go and they'll print out the cover art and stuff for disc games that they'll put into a DVD box. But then the valuable stuff, if you want a copy of Super Mario Brothers, that is going to be in the front in the glass case. There's certain things that are just sitting there that is these don't come in often, and when they do, they go fast, so they're behind the glass case. They even have imports and stuff like that too. They've got super scopes up on the wall that you can purchase and everything. It's a really good store. I love Game Over. I follow them on Facebook and I get notifications because they'll post when they get new things in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you could be like,
Yeah,
you can call in too. If you're like first come first serve, if it's like a really rare thing, you can call in ahead of time. Be like, hey, can you hold that for me? And they'll hold it for you for up to like 24 hours. And if you don't come and get it, it's like the next person who calls or comes in and buys it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a place like that in Franklin, Tennessee when I was there. But I don't think it was a chain.
Yeah.
It was just
well, that's the cool thing about Game Over is that it started in Austin, but it became a chain. So they'll even call up. It's like, hey, do you guys have that over here? It's like, yeah, okay, it'll be like a week before it comes here, but we can get it for if you buy it now and stuff like that. So there's a lot of advantages of it being a small chain.
Yeah.
And with that, we're at the end of the show.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for watching the Vomitorium, coming here live or even listening to it later on. If you enjoy the show, please share it with somebody else you think might like it. If you really enjoy it, consider giving a donation to streamlabs.com/Vomitorium live. And we'll see you tomorrow. And honestly, we need to get a Stardew Day set up. It needs to happen. We need to get Rick the game. Good. I might, if it's on sale, I might just buy it for him sometime.
Yeah, I bought him the last game, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is getting his money's worth. So.
Yeah. Okay.